Hello. Hello, everyone. We're almost to intermission, and first we would like to tell you about our project. So, we worked with Ford to look at the guiding principles for user profiles. And I'd like to introduce you to our team, myself, Chloe Grubb, Sung Park, Isaac Vander, and Max Dietrich. We would also like to thank our advisor, Lynn Stein, as well as our subject matter experts, Deb Chatra, Katrin Lynch, and Erhard Graf, and our Ford liaisons, Tonti Trintakasti, Misho Milosevsky, and Johannes Langa. Now that you've been introduced to our team, we would like to tell you a little bit about our project and the different context around the problem space. So, mobility today exists as a way to get from point A to point B. It's a tool to get us where we need to be. Mobility of the future is one that is fully connected, multimodal, and data-driven. Mobility options will be optimized for people to get where they need to be, as well as enhance their experience. This connectivity opens up a new opportunity to develop and improve vehicles and mobility services, which makes mobility safer, more effective, more efficient, and convenient. By seamlessly connecting users, vehicles, and infrastructure, Ford can redefine its mobility experience. It can bring people closer together and build a better future and meet the needs of every customer. When imagining this future, we thought about this central question of what do people care about in a mobility experience that is both data-driven and fully connected? Or rather, how do people feel about this imagined future, and what do they envision for it? So, we developed our own process to answer this question. It was founded in human-centered design. There were 3 distinct phases of this process, including the explore phase, the conceptualize phase, and the synthesize phase. Each of these phases allowed us to progress further into answering the question. This bar will be appearing throughout the presentation along the bottom of the screen to show where we are throughout the process. And in terms of the actual process, each phase had 2 to 3 different areas of focus. Each iteration of this human-centered design process consisted of activities meant to discover insights into users and their behaviors in order to develop ideas to exceed users' needs. We've displayed our process in this way to highlight its iterative nature and how we are constantly revisiting what we learned in earlier phases to help inform what we're doing in the later phases. Now, let's take a look at what each of these entailed. The explore phase, where we worked on learning the space and understanding what is currently being done in it. This phase consisted of 3 different areas of focus: research, experience, and understanding. For the literature research, we looked at over 50 consumer surveys, white papers, and academic journals to understand more about personal data and the transportation industry. We derived insights from this existing work used to build our knowledge base to help inform those later phases. We also ran 23 different design activities. These activities drew inspiration from a wide range of different companies and existing works. So if you look up at the screen, you can see the range of some logos that we drew inspiration from. This is anything from a music company, Spotify, a coffee shop, Starbucks, to our very own Boston Public Transit, the MBTA. As you can see, most of these logos don't have anything to do with transportation, and that's because they're doing work in data that transportation is not currently doing. We needed to derive inspiration from these companies and see what they're doing in the data space so that we can then apply it to this new-founded transportation or future of mobility space. Everything that we learned in these previous 2 areas of focus led us to understanding, or talking to users in a way that allowed us to test these insights and see what they thought of the future of mobility and the insights we were finding. We ran 47 different interviews with young professionals. So this means that we talked to the people who are going to be the primary interactors of this future environment. These young professionals are the ones that are going to be experiencing this future that we envision. So we need to make sure that it's something that they want to participate in. From these interviews, we derived 5 different personas. These personas allowed us to build empathy for the users, as well as keep them in mind throughout the process. While we can't think of every single 47 interviewee, we can think of these different personas. So while one interviewee might not fit perfectly into a persona, it does mean that they fit into a spread of them. This allowed us to condense all of our insights, their values, and their pain points in a way that we can keep them in mind into the future and make sure that we never lose sight of who we are designing for. Now, how does this tie back into that central question from earlier? Well, the insights we learned from this phase will form the foundation of our future knowledge base, leading us into the conceptualize phase, or testing with our users and ideating on how to properly do that. This phase consisted of two different activities, the ideation and the co-design space. The ideation took all of our insights from before, and we developed 70 different ideas as to what the future of mobility could look like. We tried to envision far out future, 30 plus years into the future, and really get rid of all of the misconceptions we currently have about transportation and think about what it could be ideally. So this allowed us to generate these 70 ideas, which we, through a series of refinement processes, condensed into 4 central themes. These themes all touched at the underlying causes and insights that we found in those 70 ideas, but condensed them into a way that we could test these themes with our users. This testing led us to co-designs. Co-designs are where we pose hands-on interactive activities to our users to see how they interact and how they feel with what we are presenting them. This allowed us to not directly answer them or directly ask them about how they felt about our 4 central themes, but rather see how they interacted with it and then eventually derive how they felt about it from there. We ran 17 different co-design sessions. Some of these were with returning interviewees, and some of them were with new young professionals. We wanted to make sure that we had a spread of people who fit into our previous 5 personas, to make sure that we were talking to everyone and making sure that everyone was represented. How does this tie back into the central question? Well, this phase allowed us to iteratively test how people want data to play a role in their lives and their mobility needs. And finally, we went into synthesizing, or finalizing our principles and our insights. The synthesis phase looked like refining our principles and then telling the story of how we got there. To refine our principles, we reviewed our co-designs to find recurring themes and revisited those earlier lists of principles to create this final set of guiding principles. We were constantly pulling on information that we learned in the previous phases to inform this phase. Today, we would like to share with you 3 of the principles that our users found most important. There were 9 in total, though. The first one being that it's consistent with other data-based ecosystems. We are surrounded by data-based ecosystems. Our phones, our laptops, and everything else. We have a routine, we have interfaces we like to use, and it needs to be consistent with what we expect data to look like and feel like. It needs to be accountable on data use and misuse. There is no current standard for how data should be treated. And users want to know that the data is being put to good use, but also that there is certain precautions and guidelines for when misuse might happen. And finally, that there is reliable core functionality. Not only do you want your car to turn on whenever you go outside, you also want the experience you have in it to be reliable and consistent. You don't want to be surprised by something that your car is doing. So these 3 insights allowed us to answer our users' questions and then ultimately tell the story of how we got here. In addition to these principles, we created a process book to document the steps we took, and this process book that you can see the cover of on the screen will now sit in Ford's office so that they can refer back to it at any time to see what we learned, but also how we got there. So, revisiting that central question we posed earlier of what do people care about from a mobility experience in a world that is fully connected and data-driven? Our answer to this question is our set of design principles. And ultimately, Ford can use our process and our principles to understand users and guide the development of future mobility experiences. If you would like to learn more about our process and more in depth about what we did, please visit our poster. Thank you.